In this video, traders, we're going to look at 7 different ways to get exposure to the cannabis industry. Stay tuned. Hey traders, welcome to you. Okay, so you probably are aware, if you watch any financial news, that cannabis is the big thing at the moment. Some people are saying it's the next cryptocurrency. We've seen a lot of growth very quickly, because we know there's a black market for cannabis, and we're also seeing now a lot of countries in the West, Canada, states are starting to do it. Some of the countries in Europe are starting to do it. They're starting to legalize cannabis, whether that's for medicinal use or for recreational use. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the legislation because it's literally changing day by day. There's news coming out all the time, so you're going to have to keep abreast of what's happening and where it's being legalized, what the restrictions are. But in this video, I want to talk about different ways that we can potentially get exposure to a new trend that could be happening and could be opening up and opening its opportunities for companies to make some money. Okay, so the first and most obvious one is to buy a cannabis grower, right? It grows on a plant. These are the guys who are growing it in their laboratories, for want of a better word. You know, they're controlling the environment. They're doing all the things that you would expect a standard grower of any produce or any product or any crop or anything would do to increase the yield. They're growing it, the costs are going to growing it, then they're selling it. So that's the obvious place. And there's lots of growers out there. And by the way, if you stick around and you subscribe, I'm going to do lots of videos around this theme, because there's plenty of potential opportunity or interesting trade ideas or companies to look at in this space. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Okay, so buying a grower, the obvious one, the guys who are actually growing the cannabis bud. Okay, number 2, packaging. So there's 2 ways to look at this. Number 1 is secure delivery. Now, in some places, it has to be in a specific packaging, like a medicinal packaging, to send out to people if they're posting it out, because it can get into the wrong hands. There's got to be a way it doesn't split open, all this kind of stuff. And that's the sort of by the by. But the other thing is the marketing of it. So the packaging, let's assume that it's legalized for recreational purposes and people are purchasing it based on choice, as they would do a tobacco product. Now, I recognize that, especially in the UK, I'm not sure about other countries, it's completely debranded now, cigarettes, etc. It's just completely shielded. There's no branding on products. It's just people have to buy what they say they're going to buy. But if you cycle back multiple years, packaging was a big way of getting people's attention. If they're a smoker and they're buying cigarettes, they potentially would make the decision based on, obviously, price, but the packaging. So assuming that similarity with cannabis, and assume that someone is selecting based on packaging, but assume there's also some legislation that says, hey, you can't kind of have certain images on it. This is going to be a very specialist marketing job. So companies that are specializing in creating this packaging, creating it within the legislation, within the framework that they're allowed, may well be a good play. And something to point out here, guys, while we go through this list, is that there's a couple of ways of looking at investing in this industry. Is either you go all in and you buy a grower. If they're growing cannabis, you're all in on cannabis being the next big thing, and you want it to be legalized. You want it to get traction, to make money that way. Or you look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to invest in a company that has a big section or a good chunk of their profits potentially coming from cannabis. And so even if that doesn't come to fruition, and whatever happens, or it takes too long, there's still a good chunk of the pie that they're making from other agriculture or other things. As an example, the packaging is a great one from what came to my mind. You know, they're still making money. They're not solely reliant on the cannabis industry. Let's be honest, if the cannabis industry just died off and it went completely back to being illegal and all that kind of stuff, then the growers will just be completely worthless overnight. So not I'm saying that is going to happen, but the point is you can diversify with that kind of strategy. Okay, number 3, the dispensary. So the actual bricks and mortar place, I guess, or perhaps it's going to be online. I'm not sure how it's all working yet, but the place where they're actually buying it in a wholesale, I expect, and then selling it off at retail, if that's the way it's all going to work. So something like that. And number 4, drug makers. So rather than going with the cannabis as in the recreational use of cannabis, perhaps this is more along the medicinal side of it. So using some of the ingredients within cannabis to infuse into medicines or to create medicines or all that kind of other stuff. Now it becomes more legalized, and like I say, there's a staggering section of recreational, medicinal, all that kind of stuff. But if you've got an existing drug maker or even a new drug maker that's saying, hey, we are pioneering the delivery of the active drug in cannabis, we are pioneering a drug that helps someone with this, and we're adding this cannabis part of it to improve it. You get the idea. We could go on and on about it, but that would be another way of getting investment into this kind of area. Okay, number 5, nutrients and yield. What do I mean by that? So even going so far as to find fertilizers that have been perhaps adapted for cannabis. They're probably an existing company. There might be something out there that is specifically used and becomes like the leading brand that the growers use. And by the very nature of it, of course, if they need that particular brand, or if there's whatever it may be, some kind of fertilizer or whatever else, I'm not a farmer, but you get the point, something that they can use to increase and improve the yield. Other things that I haven't put in here, which perhaps is worth thinking about, it's on the same kind of line, is software. This is a very tech, very tech type business. Even though it's traditional farming, for want of a better word, you're planting a seed and you're growing it. There's a lot of technology involved. These are very sterile environments they're growing these plants in. These flowers in. I'm not sure what they call the actual flower, the bud, the flower, or the plant, but you get the point. They are very, very advanced, and they're tracking, how they're seeding it, the germination, the yield they're getting out. They're putting in which seeds they use, the best crop, the cuttings, all this stuff, and it takes a lot of kind of data. So I expect that, I'm sure there's some software out there ready for farmers to do this, but something perhaps that's more adapted to the cannabis market might be, as I alluded to earlier, a way of investing in something that isn't solely reliant on the cannabis market to make money, but has an arm and could boom based on that, based on a lot of the growers using this specific software or yield calculations or whatever it may be. Okay, number 6, law enforcement. So undoubtedly, there will be some laws around this. There might be something like, hey, you might find a lot of people who are using it, it's like alcohol and driving or doing things they shouldn't be doing. And so there might be things like breathalyzer kits that come out that need to test if people are going to start using it like they do, like drinking beer or drinking wine. There needs to be some way that the police can stop people driving under the influence or operating machine or whatever it may be. You get the point. It's kind of another layer on and thinking of how, what might happen, what's going to happen then, who needs to now be involved to make sure this doesn't get out of control and all those other good things. Okay, and the final one, guys, number 7 is good old ETF. You can get an ETF which will mix in a lot of these things, and there's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be more coming out soon. And again, make sure you hit the subscribe, if you're interested in cannabis, because I'm going to do some research and share some videos with you about all these different kind of things, and we'll look at all these topics individually. But an ETF, good way of getting some broad exposure if you don't fancy going and digging around and doing a lot of kind of grunt work, for want of a better word, on each individual company. Anyway, guys, 7 different ways to get exposure to the cannabis market, and one of the most obvious ones. These are perhaps less obvious, but something to consider if it's of interest to you. All right, guys, see you next one. Take care. Bye-bye.